Michael's joining us today to talk about some incredible experiences that he personally has had.
These type of folks were really into necromancy. She was really into like Santeria. There's a certain type of witchcraft that she was into. And I'm just looking up at them, and just the way they would move in and out from the trees. I remember just going, they seem like the typical UFO things that you see, but they're not acting like that. I didn't really believe in a lot of that.
Hey everybody, and welcome to the Paranormal Portal Podcast. I'm your host, Brent Thomas. Thank you all for joining us, and special thank you goes out to all of you who continue to support the podcast and continue to spread the word. Always remember, if any of you out there have experiences of your own that you'd like to share, feel free to email me at paranormalportalradio@gmail.com. Again, paranormalportalradio@gmail.com, and you too could be a guest on the show. We are welcoming Michael, the creator and host of Shield of the Sun. Welcome to the show, Michael. How you doing, brother?
I'm very well, brother. How are you?
I'm wonderful, and thanks again for reaching out and making this happen. I think anytime we have an opportunity to talk to experiencers, it's so powerful because, of course, there's so many stories and things online and such, but it's always most powerful hearing from the people that experienced it. And if you don't mind, I think probably the best place to start is, where did this begin for you?
7 years old. So I grew up in Lathrop Projects in Chicago. And a lot of people may not know like what Lathrop Projects was like, but back in the 80s, it was considered a place where you had three types of people. You had poor, hardworking people, and you had people into occultism. And you had people into other, I guess you could say, alternative ways of looking at things. People into a lot of strange things. There was a lot of blood, a lot of death. There was a lot of things like that left a place that can easily leave a place very haunted. Sure. And that was like the reputation this place had. So not a luxurious place, but it was a real grimy like place. And so I had to live there for I think I had to live there since as a child. I think I got there until 4. I didn't come out of there until about maybe 10 or 11. So when I was about 7 years old, I was having like an argument with my mother, and I can't remember exactly what we were arguing about. I think it had something to do with me staying up very late, and I guess I was being in trouble or something of that. And I was always worried about my mom because, my mom's was into some things that was kind of hard. I don't want to say her name. I love my mom. This isn't to bash my mom. But she was really into like Santeria. There's a certain type of witchcraft that she was into. So I didn't really believe in a lot of that in terms of like what it exactly was, that type of format. But I'll tell you what happened though. So when I was 7 years old, I had gone to sleep. I was having this bad argument, and I look at the corner of my wall, and I noticed there's a shadow like by the wall. But the shadow was like a human form. Like you could tell it felt like a person was behind there. Ooh. So when I looked at it, I was like, I was sleeping in a bunk bed too. I'm at the bottom and my brother's on the top. And I said to my brother, is that, you messing around? And I thought maybe he was like playing, doing some shadows, whatever he could be doing up there. Sure. So I'm like, dude, stop that. And he just looks down. I'm not doing anything. So we had an argument. Because I could swear he's doing something. And then my mom comes in, tells us to shut up, closes the door, turns on the lights and says, you see, nothing. Nothing's there. Go to bed. Closes the door. It comes right back. So I really felt like it was looking at me, like not in a good way, but just like giving me this look like, it was just real bad. And then in terms of how it looked, so I decided to close my eyes and go, if I shut my, God, I'm remembering this so well now. I closed my eyes and just decided, if it'll go away, you shut your eyes,
Sure,
it'll go away. Maybe it's just in my head. And then when I reopened them, that face that was at the corner of the wall came right up, right near me. And it was literally floating its face to face where I'm at the bottom of the bunk bed. So it's like hovering off the floor, just in length with my face. I'll never forget it, because at that moment, you were dealing with something demonic, something spiritual. It wasn't human. Like, this thing had eyes and literally had fire in its eyes.
Oh, no.
And I can't explain like the fire itself, only that it's not like the fire you would know in a candle, but it looks like that. But it glowed. It was like a luminous.
Wow.
It was black. The entire face was jet black. Its mouth was smiling. It had like something resembling teeth. I'm not quite sure what that was, but I just remember the hands. Like, it had arms and a hand where its ears should be. And it looked cartoonish, but it didn't make you laugh.
Right.
I remember how cold it also got too. Just the fact that as soon as you saw it, I just started screaming immediately. I was just screaming.
Right.
And that's all I had was just screams out of me. My mom comes in, and then we can feel, I felt it at the moment when she opened the door, but there was like a cold rush that came right out of the room. And the room was cold at that point. At that point, I couldn't go to bed. I couldn't think. I remember thinking to myself, what was that? My mom gave me like half-hearted explanations, in terms of, the fact that in her family, she's seen that a lot in her family and growing up. So that was one of the experiences that caused me to, later on in my life, because I had a few more, down the road, to study what the paranormal was about. Why certain families had what you would call a generational reckoning. Some call it a curse. And seeing certain things, why certain people had these experiences. Sometimes it's in a person's family because of certain practices that tend to bring it out. And sometimes it's not. Sometimes it could be something else entirely, where persons are being used as a sort of sign to see something. For in my case, I wasn't quite sure. I was just 7. I wasn't into necromancy. I wasn't into those practices. I became a Christian when I got older. Even then, as a child, I always did have a strong, I wouldn't say a strong faith in God, but I did believe in him, until I came to have a strong faith with him when I was about 20. And so that's what happened with that.
Can I ask you a question about that? Now, and it's interesting the way that you explained it. So some part of you must have felt that the catalyst for that was having an argument with your mom, that somehow there was something attached to that situation, that was the catalyst that spawned this event. Is that what you're saying?
I'm not sure. For me, I mean, when I had this argument with her, and then it happened afterward, it just happened that way. But was it because I was arguing with my mom? I'm not sure on that. I think because it was what we were arguing about. If you want to know, I think it was the matter that we were arguing about. That we were arguing about, what she's into, and it confused me because I didn't know. Maybe I missed my step, I guess you could say. I shouldn't have. I don't know. You shouldn't argue with your mom, of course. I believe in that.
Sure.
In terms of not being dishonorable,
Right.
But because I wasn't exactly being a good boy by resisting going back to sleep and telling her about her. This wasn't right. But at the same time, it could have been maybe, brother. It could have possibly been. But for me, I think it was about what we were arguing about.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point, and I appreciate the deeper context there, because it was curious to me. I know that in some practices there are these, for lack of other terms, these intelligence or beings that surround these practitioners and act as protectors and such. And so certainly to act against them can have ramifications. And I'm not saying they're good. I'm not saying that they're benevolent in any regard, but they do. I know in some esoteric and dark practices, there are spirits that are or entities that are guardians of sacred spaces. So certainly visiting there can inspire activity and problems. But in this case, it's very interesting because it's mother and child and having an argument. But I think you're right. I think it's the context of the argument was kind of key there in spawning the event. So maybe something was saying, yeah, we're here, we're real, and this is no joke kind of thing, or whatever.
It definitely gave me that impression, like what you just said. It definitely gave me that impression that it wanted me to know. Yeah, I'm around that. And it really messed my childhood up, because I'll tell you why. Because you couldn't tell that to the kids around you. Right. If you did, you were made fun of for life. I found that out in the grade I was in. It was because I tried to share it because it was such an experience. Like, hey, guess what happened last night? And oh my God, I remember just after that, I was not having a good year. I was just every day I was in a fight. I was in some kind of conflict. Even the teachers didn't like me. It was bad. It didn't stop until I got out of that school. When I got to another school where no one knew me, no one knew the story. I was able to be all right. But at that point, no, it really caused me suffering right afterward, because I couldn't have a normal childhood until I moved out of there. So things didn't go to have a more normalization until probably about 10. So from 7 to 10, man, it was just, oof. And it wasn't the first time seeing that, because right after that, I think probably within the next months, I would see other spectring kind of like things. I remember seeing the spider like on top of this roof one time. Oh. And at first I thought, it's just a big spider, Yeah. And that thing, I remember it moved off the roof, and then it just kind of moved on the side. It looked like it was just watching the windows right before it disappeared.
Oh my God, that's creepy.
And I remember seeing that, yeah. Oh. And that was right by the river. And the river where this was at, it was noted for people would drop bodies in this river. So sometimes every month, if it wasn't the mob, if it wasn't local, if it wasn't something else, police would pull bodies right out of that same river where this thing used to just hover and look at things. Wow. So it was real intense.
So it seems that this event was definitely not only your introduction into the bizarre world, but it seems to have awakened an awareness within you as well.
Yeah, like at that point, I could see a little differently from other kids. Sometimes I just ignored it. It wasn't like I was seeing dead people like in The Sixth Sense, but it was like similar to something like that. Like it was like there would be times, because it wouldn't happen every day like that kid in the movie, but it would happen every now and then that you would see things or have a feeling about something in a room that, because of, it's like being aware that there was other things there. You could be aware that there's a spirit in the room. You won't have to necessarily see it, but it's there, or you see it because it's like it knows, and then sometimes it gives you a way to see it, like a manifestation in some way. And I've had experiences like that where I've often had to be very careful, even with people I've met, like especially back then, in terms of like friends and stuff, because these demons really had a way of bringing people in my life that you wish to God never came into your life. I've had more terrible experiences with people due to that demonic activity than the demonic activity itself when I was young. But I always credit it to the fact that it was because of that. It was because you can see, or you're aware at least, right? And it hates the fact that you are. Yes. So it just, yeah. Oh, let me calm down.
Well, you're doing great, though. I mean, it sounds like you've spent quite a bit of time examining this and seeing how it's really the ramifications throughout your life, and I applaud you for that, because a lot of people just seem to be bombarded without really understanding what the hell's going on, and these events are no joke. I mean, these things are transformative experiences that really change people's lives and the way that they can view the world. And there is an old saying, ignorance is bliss. And I think in many regards, that's really true.
It is. The other thing I wanted to tell you about were some of the UFO ones that I saw. That this is kind of what led me to realizing there was a connection between them and what you call like the ghostly spirit world, as other people would call that.
Sure.
But there was a connection with it, though. So back in Chicago, there was like people who fancy themselves as like channelers, like they say they can summon your dead grandma, or summon a relative, or, these type of folks. These type of folks were really into necromancy, things like that. Some of them could have been dabbling. Some of them could have had a more, I guess, a meditative way of looking at it. They felt some kind of comfort with it. But one guy used to say he can summon ghosts and UFOs, which was very interesting. So he used to talk about how the neighborhood had UFOs and things like that. And he was probably joined by other random guys you meet at certain, in Chicago, certain scenes in Chicago, parties, clubs, arcade rooms. You'd be quite amazed what people were into. So I used to think that the ghosts and the UFOs are two different things. I used to think like, well, they got to be like two different things. And I was young, so I was just grasping at straws at this point because I wasn't really reading much until I got older. But what happened at this point was that people started having like experiences. So in Chicago, we started seeing I saw at times I would see what were these like glowing balls. So they would like glow orbs that were like white. So many times they'd be like floating across the skies. One time I thought it could have been the lights from the stores, until one time I found these set of lights that were moving, and I knew there was no other down illumination to bring the lights out. So it freaked me out because it was going, okay, so there's no highlights, there's no store, there's no planes, and I'm just watching this thing. It would make these zigzag shapes. So first it would like zig and then zag like a triangle, and then it stopped doing that, and it was joined by another one, and then they were crisscrossing each other, like forming I guess you could say a star formation, and then they move across, and then there's like a square shape they would leave behind. So I was watching that a lot. Like this one night I was watching it because they were just doing this stuff all night. Wow. And what was weird about that night was that there was hardly anyone around me. This was the weird thing about it. Like, I remember looking around, because it was the middle of the night, but not too late. It was enough for especially in Chicago, there's like people out 24/7. It's almost like Vegas. It's people are out all the time. But this night there was nobody. I'm in the middle of a real busy street. Not too busy, but busy enough. I don't see cars going past me. I don't see people walking past me. I could barely feel anyone around me but them. And I'm just looking up at them, and just the way they would move in and out from the trees. I remember just going, they seem like the typical UFO things that you see, but they're not acting like that. It was like very haunting and very eerie. And then that night, when I stopped watching that, I went home, went to bed, and I think I had woken up. I don't know if I woke up like in the early morning or not, but there was someone in my closet. That I remember. Wow. So this being in my closet was like your typical, what you look like the gray, but it was blacker than gray, for me at least. Because I know sometimes they got like different shade of colors that people have seen, but from my experience, this thing had like black skin, I guess, but it had the black eyes. It looked like it had like something like a uniform, but not like a symbol, but you can tell it's wearing something like that's tight fitting. And it's just small. It looked probably about 3 feet probably. And it was just standing in my closet, looking at me while I'm on my bed. Wow. And so I remember it felt exactly like the same feeling I had when I saw that demon when I was 7. This took place with me when I was 14, with this alien experience, if you want to call it that. But it felt very demonic. It had the same feeling. It had the same creepy MO, like the same watching like feeling. and then you just try to ignore it, and then it comes back to try to torture you. And that's what that felt like. It felt like torment. And I had just started high school too. So even coming into high school, it felt like it was trying to restart garbage in my life again. And I kept that quiet. I wouldn't tell that to anyone because I remember what happened last time. And I couldn't even tell my mother because my mother was sick and tired of that because I told her a few other times in between and she just didn't want to hear that stuff. So I was real left alone in that one. But I remember feeling like things happened to me that I can't remember, which I started having like more regrets or memories later on. And so, but yeah, I was 14 when I saw that. Like it was letting me know, like, we're watching you. You know, we've been watching you. Man. We're never going to stop watching you. And that's what that felt like. It felt like, you know, like, man, like, and some people might think like maybe you're special or different. That's not the feeling I had from that. Right. That I felt chosen for anything. It felt like being robbed, you know, sure. Like you're being screwed with. It felt more like that, like someone in your life and you wish they'd move or something. Right. That's what that felt like.
This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. It's sometimes incredibly tough to admit, but we all need help. Life gets extremely heavy sometimes, and it can become incredibly confusing to sort out what to do or how to move forward when we're faced with extraordinary obstacles in our lives. Obstacles such as professional or personal stress or just facing our modern world. In light of the complicated world we live in, it's no wonder that more and more people are seeking help to find emotional balance and learn better ways to manage the complications in their lives. Imagine having someone to talk with who always has your best interest at heart. Someone who will help you navigate the struggles and provide insight into the obstacles in life, as well as help you find better methods of facing these obstacles. There was a time when I was going through a devastating life change, and working with a wonderful therapist helped me to work through these challenges, learn healthy coping mechanisms, and rebuild myself in the process. If you feel that therapy might be for you, give BetterHelp a try. Simply fill out a brief questionnaire and you'll be matched with a licensed therapist that is flexible, affordable, and you can do all of this entirely from the comfort of your own home since it's all online. Additionally, if for any reason you feel you would like to switch therapists, you can do this at any time for no additional charge. Discover your potential with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/paranormalportal today and get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/paranormalportal. Getting back to what you were talking about, being on that busy street, but there was suddenly nothing was going on around you except these lights in the sky. Did you feel like perhaps you were personally transported, or do you, and not able to be aware of the normal activity because maybe you're in an adjusted frame of mind or something? Or
I did study that later, and okay. It did feel exactly like that because I had an experience with something with like time lapse. Like even before that, I just didn't know what that was until I studied that later. But that right there did feel like that because you're still looking at what it looks like it's still the same scene, but there's some differences in it. Like it kind of looks a little foggier and it doesn't look almost like a painting, but things are still moving, but you're not seeing anyone. It's just you in there. And I did kind of feel like, not at that time, but when I studied it later and reflected on it, that it's very possible that it could have been some kind of like a time warp where you're like, the time has stalled for you. Meaning it's moving faster for you than it is for everyone else.
Right.
And that's probably why you don't see the cars and the people, because you could be in a space of time where it's so fast, you just don't notice it, but it is. Right. And that's why no one can see you and you can't see them because they're moving at a different pace than you are. And that's kind of what I studied about.
Yeah, and I think that's very interesting because I've wondered about that as well, and I've covered, hundreds of stories through the years of similar type of events where people are, they're in one place and then they're in the same place, but suddenly there's nobody around. It's like they're in a ghost town, but it looks the same. And it makes me think that maybe there's a frequency shift, and you got to wonder, are you literally disappeared from your normal presence? Is your entire body and consciousness all shifted into this alternate vibration, or is it just a cognitive awareness that's shifted, and your body's still doing what you're doing, but you're not quite connected the same way? And that's what's really boggled my mind, because you got to wonder: did people just witness you disappear and then reappear, or were they just watching you stare off into space as you're having this whole experience?
I think it's sometimes both in certain cases.
Yeah,
because I think because in one case because I'm about to tell you about this UFO experience I had when I was in New Mexico, but in that case someone saw me staring up. But then in that case, when I was on the street, all I could say is that no one's seen me or noticed me doing anything. Right. It was like no one, because when that was over and I was walking home, that's when I started seeing cars coming up. And I did notice there was a little difference in the way the sky looked when I was seeing it and the way the sky looked when I was walking home after it.
Wow.
That it just, you could feel the lights more. You could kind of feel like something was removed from you. Right. And I think they attack your subconscious level, that it just attacks that, making you think everything's normal when it's not. It's possible that what you're saying is right, that there are times where you could be seeing it on a face-to-face level, but, you could be in a sphere of time where they can't see you, or there's times where they're doing it in real time, but you just look like you're just out there staring at the clouds or something.
Right. Yeah. It's fascinating.
And that was the tripped out part.
I can't imagine. I've not experienced that personally, and I'm glad, because I think that would really screw with your whole concept of reality,
It did.
Wow.
There's no doubt it did. Like, you see, when I got into high school around that time, it was probably from freshman to sophomore, that's when I started reading the Bible, because I wasn't reading it before. And I just suddenly started too, because especially after that, like when I had that experience, I also had another experience which is it's rough to remember. All I know is they've been messing with me a while. Mm-hmm. So when I was like in high school, I just said, man, I want to start reading the Word. And I don't know why I had that impression. I wasn't religious. I mean, I wasn't into that stuff, and sure. I just had this almost like like a kid with a teddy bear. Like, I need the Bible, because I had fears. And so I just started reading that. And then that's when that happened. So that messed me up, because I was thinking in my mind, is the aliens, is it God? Is it God and the aliens? Mm-hmm. Did God make the aliens? How come he didn't tell us that? And there was a lot of things I didn't know about the Bible at the time, like Genesis 6 and many other things. Like, I didn't know that stuff. Right. Not like I know it now, but back then I didn't. So it did. It left me confused about, what purpose in life is. I had a lot of fears. I used to be afraid of death a lot, and I just had no one threatening me either.
Sure.
And just being very paranoid. Couldn't sleep well. And even in relationships, I was not good with girls. Right. Because it was like, I just had nothing to tell them. I had nothing to talk about. Okay. I had nothing to really say much, because my life, the only interesting part about it was something I couldn't talk about with them, unless I looked more crazier than I probably did look to them. I didn't say I looked nutty to them, but they always felt like you're a little strange. You're always to yourself. You always talk to you're always, it's like, well, what do you want me to tell you?
Right.
And,
you can't.
And that was like my life at that point.
Sure.
But it was difficult, man.
You can't explain to people what it's like to have your reality flipped upside down, and how could people possibly relate to that without having actual experience? And so it doesn't surprise me at all that you turned to religion, because from a very young age you've been confronted with the strangeness that it's plaguing your existence. And so what else is there for someone to grab onto except and why wouldn't you think about your own mortality and all this stuff? Because you're being subjected to forces you couldn't possibly understand at such at those younger ages. So you grab onto something because you need some kind of anchor. So religion to me makes perfect sense, and I think it's a beautiful thing because I think religion and faith is important in our journeys. Whatever it is people choose to believe in is fine, but you got to have something to hang on to. And I think the term anchors may be a great word to use, because when everything else is in this amazing state of flux and uncertainty, you got to have that anchor, that one line to this source, or to the of security, because you're in a storm of weirdness. And so, it makes perfect sense to me. The other thing I was thinking of is, you said this experience happened after you started reading the Bible, but sometimes if you look at some of the biblical representations of like angels and stuff, they're absolutely terrifying. They're not these robed, harp playing, beautiful people in many cases. They're seeing these weird conglomerates of eyeballs and wings and stuff, and how do you make sense of that? So it's maybe some of it is maybe it's actually beautiful, but it's just so strange and unusual because we're conditioned to think that, angels, they look like radiant beings from the Lord of the Rings, except they have wings, and things like that, which is not really a traditional representation of it, according to, the Bible references to angelic visitations.
Well, I'll tell you how I got saved. And this might help you in terms of what you're talking about, where it's just right on line with what you're saying about the appearance of angels. So when I got done with high school, I couldn't even finish this high school for another reason, that it ended up in a scandal, which is a different story altogether. But I ended up having to go to Wright. I went to Wright College, where they would give you a GED and a first year in training in college. So I went there after that. And that's when I got into reading, books, things like that. But I got into a lot of the New Age stuff. So about, I think, 98 to 99, I was really dabbling into a lot of different type of things. If it was witchcraft or astrology, and I started to consider Christian astrology. So I used to read people's astrological signs, and I was doing that. And I don't even know where I was getting this info from. I was just getting a lot of impressions, I can understand the stuff, these star signs. And, but I didn't feel good about it because it was changing me. I kept hanging out at these woods. It was called Robinson Woods in Chicago. If you look this place up, you will find this place is haunted as heck. People have had experiences there going back into the late 50s. And even before that, because it was owned by this guy who used to be a chief of the Fox tribe. And so they had a lot of rituals out there. And there was 3 mounds that are out there, which are believed to have the bones of very big beings. So this was a public park. You can go and have picnics at it and stuff. So this is where I was spending a lot of time. So what happened was I was into a bad scene for a while. In terms of how I felt, it was a bad scene. But what happened was, when I went to the woods one time, it was usually a typical day. I would go there. At that time, I was heavy into drugs, so I have to admit that. I had that problem at that time. So I was out there to do that. Drug of choice was grass. I was smoking way too much grass, and just not modern at all. Sure. Had no business for it at that time, and really just zoning out. And usually what happened was I would have just, this kind of woodsy experience and go back and do astrology. And, but in this case, I remember feeling very sad. I had this overwhelming feeling of sadness that your life is not good. And it was almost like this message went right into my head. And it really was just that, all in a row. Your life is not good. Your life is tragic. And if it keeps going the way you are, and if you keep having the things you're doing, you're going to end up in a real bad place. And I was and I started crying. Like I literally, and I wasn't feeling anything like at that time. I was a real hardened individual when this happened. I was involved in an affair. I was married and I had a mistress and I had no compassion really. I was really in a bad frame of mind, but for some reason I was breaking down like a kid. And when I was breaking down, man, I just started feeling like, I don't know what's going on, but I feel like there's something in the forest with me. And then as soon as I said that, that's when there was this, it was like first a bright light. It first saw it at the top of the trees. And at the top of the trees, I could see something coming down right in front of me. And it glowed. And I do remember that it has a face, like a humanoid face. And it was white, like the skin was real white, like the crayon white. And I remember it just, the hair and everything, you could tell it's a supernatural being, but it had no form to say like human or man. It looked like a man, but you could see this thing could be anything. Because all I saw was the face and the upper body, but the bottom part was like translucent and transparent. Like you could see right through it, but you could see he's very powerful. He even looked like me. That was the thing that I noticed about him, that the face he had was like looking almost like if you had to look at a perfect version of yourself. Like if you could look the most like radiant, that is what you would want to look like using your own face. And that's what he looked like. And then when I saw that demon again when I was 7. I don't know if it's the same one, but the same species, if you will, looking at the event, like looking at me, looking at this angelic being. And we're all just in this space, in this forest. And what I remembered next was looking up in the sky. Everything went very bright just for that moment, and seeing a dove do a spiral action. And this thing was spiraling down. And at first I was thinking, what's this bird? Because this bird is tripping me out. And it was pure dove white. I kid you not. This thing was like coming down out of nowhere. And there's like, this forest is noted for pigeons, but these pigeons, it didn't look like this. Not only that, but I got real scared, real, almost like I couldn't move. But then I'm like trying to stare at this thing. And when it came down, I remember the eyes of this bird was not normal. They were black, but they had a powerful light in the middle. Like as soon as it made eye contact with me, that was it. It was like all I saw was a fuzz, like static, and it was just white static. And then when this was done, I remember just going straight home. That was it. I gave my life to Jesus Christ that night after I saw that. I kid you not. Yeah. Like my life was never the same after that day. It was like the culmination of trying to understand all the things that were happening to me. And it just led me to that understanding that I needed to get out of it. Because you see, when I saw that event that night, I had a lot of demonic experiences prior. So I had a confrontation with demon possession about 2 months before I had that experience in the forest.
Were
I was
you
really feeling like I was being taken over by something.
Okay.
But after that experience, I changed for the better rather than the worse that I was going down on.
So it was your experience with demon possession, not seeing someone else.
No, my own.
Yeah.
Mine. Yeah. It was 2 months before I had that event in the woods, but it was my own possession. Yeah. Like, you see, what happened was in 98 is when I got into astrology, but I ended up meeting a woman who I started having an affair with. And one of the things I remember she asked me was for a lock of my hair.
Uh-oh.
And she wanted to go and take that and well, of course, she was into witchcraft. I didn't take that stuff seriously in 98.
Sure.
In 98, I was trying to figure out the truth myself. So I was trying to understand, God and the aliens and all of that. I was really confused in 98. Mm-hmm. So even my wife was. My wife wasn't any, my wife was into that stuff too. And so what happened was she asked me for that, right? She goes, I don't know what she did with it exactly, but all I know is I started having an affair with her. And the next thing you know, like, I can just feel like I had more energy, mm-hmm. but I felt really off. Like I constantly wanted to do bad things. I wanted to do more drugs. I wanted to be more perverted. I wanted to be really the wrong thing. And I got really into astrology to the point where I was like really making whole charts, sun signs, planetary signs. Mm-hmm. I had people that wanted to pay me to do their chart, like it was very strange. And I was just getting worse and worse and worse. And then I remember one day when I realized the possession I had at that point, I'll tell you what happened. I remember just saying to myself, I'm going to take a day and not do anything. I can't be acting like this. So, and even my mom was surprised because my mom, was like, you've been through a lot, kid, but this isn't who you are. Even she was surprised that I'd come and see my mom, and my mom was like, who are you at times? Oh. Like, oh, kid, what's going on with you?
Right.
And it was pretty bad. And, but I remember just having like experiences where the room would be cold. And I mean dead cold, like real cold. Sure. You could smell dead flowers in the room. There would even be these like openings at times in the corners of my room. And then one night, which really gave me this impression that I was probably on my way to hell, was seeing this demon, because I was fighting with myself that day of not doing what I normally did. And I could feel my body get overheated. And then suddenly it was like something was burning in my nose. And then that's when it came out. And I kid you not, like it came out of my face and turned around and looked right at me.
Oh, wow.
And so that was like, man, that had me thinking about God after that. And then, but I just didn't know how to talk to God. I thought I was done, to be honest with you. I thought, I'm done. This thing don't like me. God don't like me. But then that's when it changed in that experience in the woods. That's how I know it was an angel of God, and that it was God's presence that I got to feel, because when that was over with, that demonic presence couldn't stay in me. Like in a day or so, it was gone. I wasn't feeling the drive anymore. I wasn't feeling bad passions. Then it was different. Mm. And I had to go through a period where I was being made fun of a lot. I had friends making fun of me. My ex, well, she was my ex now, the mistress making fun of me because I broke up with her. I had my whole world fall apart. Lost my job, the peers I had there. Mm-hmm. No one wanted to talk to me. Like, they loved me when I was an astrologer, when I was doing all this bad stuff. But as soon as I came back from that experience and said, look, I'm going to start getting into the Word of God. I mean, I know that sounds weird to you guys, but I got to change. I got to sober up. And they didn't want to hear that. No. So not even my family. My mom kind of, but she thought I was being turning into a Jesus freak or something. So she put it, because she was still into her thing. Mm-hmm. She just didn't like the presence on me, but it was just, she had a standard for herself too. So, which wasn't something I could follow. Right. So I didn't get any support from them, just to ultimately put it. And I was left alone. I was even homeless for about almost 4 years after that experience too, because it was trying to find myself and trying to find life again. And all I had were connections from my old past. And it was like Satan turned everyone he could against me. Sure. In order to make me just feel like ostracized for trying to do what was better with my life. But I'll tell you what, though, this activity, this thing in the woods, took place in the year 2000.
Okay.
So I had been saved since then.
Good for you.
And for about 24 years, I was studying the Word of God, studying all the apparitions that I had, and then that's when I wanted to learn about other people's apparitions and to try to add on to what I was learning, because I needed edification. And then I got into seminary study when I went to Northwest Church of Christ, and then that's when I started to I actually ended up doing the channel that I do only out of request that someone asked me about questions about aliens and demons, and I had taken theological study and was able to learn more about what the phenomenon was. Mm-hmm. And that's what led to me doing the channel, was really based on people asking in my little small circle,
sure,
what that was about, and then just making a channel about it.
Now, when the thing came out of your nose or out of your face, was
mm-hmm.
it that exact same apparition from when you were 7, or did it look
Actually,
different?
No.
Okay.
No. The thing that came out of my face was black, like that other apparition. It had like the black mist and the black appearance,
mm-hmm.
but instead of the big fiery eyes, it had small, round, black pinpoint eyes, like a pin drop or a dot.
Okay,
was how his eyes looked, and the mouth was motionless. Like where the demon I saw when I was a young child had this big smiley like mouth.
Yeah.
It was horrific, but a big giant like evil smile. This one had no smile.
Oh.
It just was like a slant for a mouth.
Wow.
Like no emotion. Like almost like he couldn't even talk if he wanted to, but
right.
It gave you the impression that it hated you. And
yeah.
That's what I remember how it felt. Like I could feel it talking in my brain, like murder, like it hated me, like I'm going to kill you, like kind of thing. But it had black pinpoint eyes.
That's interesting because, I've often wondered about, the possession and such like that. And I think mm-hmm. there's different phases of possession. And ultimately, it goes from, presence, infestation, oppression, and ultimately possession. And then there's a thing allegedly called perfect possession, and that is where there's no difference anymore between the demonic presence and the person themselves. It's like they're absolutely seamless and completely conjoined, and so there's not one or the other. It's just this new, I guess abomination is probably the best way to say it. But it's like in your experience,
there are levels like that. Like where I was at, I wasn't at the final stage.
Right.
That's what you call like totally being transformed. Like
right.
you're taken over in a way where you're sharing brain telepathy with the demon.
Right.
I was close to it. I was pretty close. But it didn't go that far. But it was inside of me. It had enough to where it could really drive me to want to like do, even if I didn't want to, like if I didn't want to fornicate, you're fornicating. If you didn't want to do drugs, you're going to do drugs. It was trying to get me to do other things it couldn't do. I was never in a satanic ritual where I sacrificed a cat or a person or did anything like that.
Right.
I never did a necromancy ritual where I'm summoning a demon to come into me.
Yep.
So it was more of an oppressive like possession where it saw me doing these other things for which it can make a claim. And then jumped on me, and during that,
right.
But it wanted me to go toward that, to become more interested in rituals and prescribed methods, but I wouldn't do that. The far as I would do is the star charts, and that was it. But I can always feel it wanting to push for more, and then that's when God intervened.
Yeah, because whatever came out of you then might be the corrupted bit of yourself, like you saw the final purging of that, and therefore it was outside of you and it hated you because, it was not to the point of that perfect possession. And this is me just spitballing as I'm hearing your story, but
no, it makes sense.
Yeah.
That it does make sense because that does feel right. That is because I'm remembering it from what I remember and what you're saying, but I'm remembering it from what I remember, if that's right or not. And for me, that was right. That does, at least that speaks for me, what you're saying.
Yeah, because I think that even if it doesn't get to the point of a perfect possession, there is a corruption of spirit that's happening. It's corrupting and changing and maybe mixing up your soul to the point that that intelligence is starting to meld into form, and so. If seeing the park when you're in the park, seeing that angelic presence and the dove and stuff was probably what broke the connection, and then you finally purged it out, the rest of the corruption in that instant. Again, just some thoughts, but I think it's amazing.
it later on, I appreciated what happened to me. And at the time, yeah, it was. I won't say, I'm not going to level that experience. It was. My life went completely apey after that. But it did. It was a beautiful experience. Like, it was probably the greatest experience I could say I've had up into my life right now. Like, in terms of like remembering how I got saved, it burns into my brain to this day. And I think it's what always reminds me of the reality of the higher power of God, you know, like how real he is, you know, that it was the moment I realized that Satan was real and God was real. There is no argument about it. You know, there's no more debate about it. Like, for me, it's not a question, you know, do you believe in God? Are you sure he's real? And I know because of that moment, that day, I know, no, he is very real. Yeah. And, but because of other experiences, I went, well, I know Satan is real too, but I know who's stronger because I know what he did for me regarding that moment. And he really did save my life. Like, he really came at a moment in my life where I was at a crossroads about where my soul was going. Right. And he gave me a very good option to see that, look, I'm real too. I'm just as real as him. So decide, you know? Yeah. And I'll never forget that, you know, for him to be so mighty, you know, to what he is, to think on me, that, and even you and anyone else in this world, is amazing. Yeah, because I can tell you this: the demonic, however people want to believe it, all it wants to do is abduct you, use you, torture you, play with your head, mess with you, give you bad dreams, bad nightmares. But when I've dealt with the Holy Spirit, it's always done the opposite. It's always helped me to be more educated, more aware. It's even helped me to help others, where the I guess the so-called alien spirit has never done that. Has only been selfish and reserved and just, yeah.
This is amazing stuff, and I really appreciate you coming on to talk about it, because I think these are the kind of stories that are very inspirational and maybe will help to help a whole bunch of other people that'll be listening to this. So I really commend your bravery, and I commend your honesty and your willingness to come here and talk about it, because I think that's the most powerful part of shows like this, is hearing from people that have walked these walks and hearing, you know, especially a redemption story like your own is just amazing. And, you know, I just hope people always consider the fact that there always is hope. Don't ever give up, and don't ever succumb to the darkness, the fear, the worry and the strain, and just know that there is beauty and good in it, and it's just waiting for you, you know. And so I think your story is incredibly powerful, Michael, and I can't thank you enough for being here, first of all. But second of all, could you take a couple minutes and let people know how to stay in touch with you and what you're doing, and let them know a little bit about your channel?
Yeah, you can find me at Shield of the Sun, Michael Jimenez on YouTube. And you can also find me at Shield of the Sun on BitChute. What I basically do is that I do videos about the paranormal and the strange, and I do videos about anything. I actually do biblical videos on the lessons, like I talked about the Gospels. I talk about events, you know, involving all manner of things, ranging from anything paranormal, even things that are strange. I did like 200 videos about that, and I have about 2,000 videos of a library of various subjects pertaining to anything you basically would want to know. And they're all basically based from stories that have happened. So everything I talk about in my channel, it's always from a source. It's always from some you can read about, some you can trace back, and even from people's personal testimonies, like testimonies that validate, you know, a lot of the things that people have studied and read. All those things, you can find that. That's basically what I do, is that I do videos talking about different subjects. Some of them are some of the political happenstances of today, but nothing too controversial. I don't get all deep into that aspect of it. But I do have enough to where there's enough meat for anybody who has any type of political leaning or whatever their beliefs are. You know, they'll always find something with that. So I talk about secret societies. I talk about a lot of different things like that. And so that's a channel basically for people who want to know truth that's not available in school. That's why I call it shield of the sun, in the sense that it gives you a shield against ignorance, and gives you a comfort that other people can understand you and your plight. And that's what I do. That's where you can find me at. You can find me there. Please come on down and take a look if you like.
Very cool. And thank you so much for coming on the show, reaching out and making this happen. It's been an absolute honor talking to you, and thank you so much for sharing your experiences right here on the portal.
Thank you. It's been an honor as well. And I want to say God bless you to you, and thank you for the opportunity to let me talk.
Get out! All right, guys, thank you so much for joining us here on tonight's show. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Please feel free to follow us on Facebook, facebook.com/Paranormal Portal Radio, as well as finding us on Twitter. We're on Twitter at Paranormal Portal, Portl, and we'd love to have you stop by our YouTube page and subscribe and check out our shows there. We got hundreds of shows, Journeys into the Paranormal Portal, so I hope you'll check it out, guys. We're over there at youtube.com/Paranormal Portal, so hope to see you guys soon. We'll be back, of course, for more podcasts in the coming days. So we love you all. Be good, be kind, be nice. Take care of each other. Help each other out. Find the magic in every day. And remember to laugh as much as you can.